This is my oral history interview with Leah Charles on women's liberation. So, Leah, you were born in Barbados and lived there for 11 years. How was that?
Well, looking back, I can say that I really enjoyed growing up in Barbados. Um, I grew up there with lots of family members, and I didn't just have one home. I grew up in 3 different homes. So I grew up in my father's house, my paternal grandparents, and my maternal grandparents.
Okay, so where are these places? What were the names of these places in Barbados?
I grew up in the capital of Barbados, which is Bridgetown. Um, yeah, and that's in St. Michael,
Okay.
Barbados.
Okay. So you left Barbados when you were 11, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so when you left, did you leave a lot of friends?
I did. I left a lot of friends behind. I had just started high school, and so I left behind friends from both primary school and new friends that I had just met when I started high school.
Okay. Do you regret moving?
I don't think that I regret moving, but I do, sit and think about how my life might have been if I had stayed in Barbados.
Okay. So when you left Barbados, did your parents move with you to America?
So when I left Barbados, I left my father in Barbados, and my mother was already living in the United States.
So she sent for you to come to the United States?
Yes.
Okay. So why did your mother send for you to come to the United States?
Well, she wanted me to have a better life, and most people in the West Indies think that there's more opportunities for you to have a better life in the United States
So
or other countries.
Okay. So you spoke on school already, but how was school in Barbados different from going to school in the U.S.?
Oh, it's very different. The education system is a lot more advanced. So like I said earlier, I was 11 when I started high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I moved to the United States, I was more advanced than my peers who were just starting 7th grade. Back then in America, like when I came here, students didn't wear uniforms to school. In Barbados, I grew up wearing a uniform to school. Teachers are a lot more lenient in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in Barbados or in the West Indies, your teachers were allowed to discipline you with, corporal punishment. So you get beat with a ruler, a belt, an open palm, and it was fine. That's how you were disciplined in Barbados.
So you felt the discipline was different, yes. So when you came to America, did you enjoy the more lenient discipline?
Wasn't that I enjoyed it. I never got in trouble in Barbados when I was in school. And I was a pretty obedient student. I did well in my classes. So I was never, I wasn't, I wasn't punished for behavior or, like for instance, like failing a test or anything like that. So when I came here, I was shocked that, everything was so lenient, but it wasn't like, oh wow, like, I can, I just kind of went with the flow. It was like, oh, okay, this is very different, but, that was it.
Mm-hmm. So when you came to America, you said that you felt like you were more advanced. So did you feel like with the academics, did you feel that you already learned the things that they already learned and that you should move up a grade, or that, you've learned it, but you still needed more, context behind it?
So when I first started here, initially I moved here when I was 7, and I lived here in Boston for 6 months, and then I went back to Barbados, and then I moved here permanently when I was 11. And both times when I started here in the 2nd grade and in the 7th grade, yes, I felt as though I was more advanced. When I was in the 2nd grade, I remember they did want to promote me into the 3rd grade. I didn't want to be promoted into the 3rd grade because I had just made new friends coming here, and it was just a lot of transitions. And they tried to test me, and I purposely I answered questions wrong because I didn't want to be promoted.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of knew that, I was dishonest, I guess you could say. But I wasn't promoted. And then again, I was only here for 6 months. And the same thing when I was here, when I moved here again in 7th grade, academics as far as language arts and mathematics, I was advanced. But then again, when it came to, like, history, I didn't know anything about American history. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Okay, so you left off on how it was hard for you in history because you didn't know much about American history.
Right. So, in the West Indies, we grew up learning about our history, which had a lot of African culture. You know what I mean? Like the Arawaks, the Karens, and coming from that over into this entire new world, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where, they were talking about the battles, the Boston Tea Party, and, like the English and America fighting for freedom, with the English. I had no prior background. I didn't even know what the 4th of July really was. Like, I knew of the 4th of July, but I really didn't know that it was America's Independence Day. So things like that, it was a difficult transition in some areas of education and social, but like I said, there were some areas where I felt as though I excelled, and then there were other areas where I needed a lot of support. Okay. And coincidentally, I did not really get much support because everyone thought, well, she does so well academically in this area, then she just needs to, pick her pace up over here, and I kind of just didn't like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you said when you moved from Barbados, like, you left friends. So coming to America, was making friends easy for you?
No, it was not. I mean, schoolmates or my peers, they were kind, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But as far as having a close relationship with them, no, it was not easy. In Barbados, I had lots of friends, and I had my own little circle of close friends. Mm-hmm. When I came to America, I guess you could say if anyone on the outside looking in, they would say, oh, she has friends, she's adjusted well. But really and truly, I didn't have any close relationships with anyone in, I'll say, 7th and 8th grade. Mm-hmm. When I started high school, it was different. I had 2 really good friends who turned out to be lifelong friends. I still speak with them, and we're still friends. One of them I work with. But again, that transition from 7th grade and 7th and 8th grade, it was kind of a difficult transition for me as far as it was a difficult transition socially. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Do I sound like I'm just, like, repeating myself?
No, it makes sense.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then with the West Indian upbringing, like a lot of kids after school, oh, what are you guys doing? Oh, I'm hanging out at Shara's house. Oh, well, Leah couldn't hang out at Shara's house because this West Indian parent of mine, you know, you go to school, you come home. You don't go sitting up in anybody's house.
Yeah.
Oh, y'all had a sleepover? Oh, Leah can't sleep over at anybody's house. We're going to sleep her tail right in her bed. Like, there was no sleeping out. There was no going to this, or if I was going to someone's party, my parents, my mother just was not as lenient as, you know, my peers' parents. And so that kind of hindered, you know, any relationships that I formed.
Okay. So speaking of these relationships, do you feel that your mother got more strict when you guys moved to America officially, or was it always like that?
So here's the thing. I did not know my mother until I was 7 years old. And like I said, I only lived with her for about 6 months. So my mother didn't raise me. And when I moved here at the age of 11, I guess I knew that she was my mother, but in a sense it was almost like moving to this whole new country with a stranger. You know what I mean? So I didn't know what her disciplinary styles were like. I didn't know if she was strict or not strict. I really didn't have much, I didn't really have that, you know, knowledge of how strict my mother would be or how she would be as a parent. But if you ask me about my father or any, you know, other relatives, I could say, oh, yeah, well, no, they could never go for this, or, you know?
Okay. So as growing
Did I answer my question?
Yes, that does answer my question. So when as you got older, like, yeah, I understand that you didn't really you know, at first know your mother, but as you got older, do you think you picked up her traits when you became a mother yourself?
No. I mean, no, culturally, yes. But as far as her parenting style, no, I don't think so. I would hope that I am more lenient than my mother, and I would hope that I have a better relationship with my son than my mother did with me. But like I said, culturally, there are some things that I guess are instilled in me because, you know, of my Caribbean heritage. But as far as her parenting styles, no, I don't think that they're similar.
Okay. So speaking of your son, Azadi, when did you have him?
I had my son when I was 26 years old.
Okay. So did you feel that you were stable with citizenship when you had Azadi?
Yeah, definitely. I did.
All right. So, I'm going to move on to your occupation. So what is your current occupation?
I am an ABA therapist, and an ABA therapist is an applied behavioral analyst. So what I do is I work with autistic students, and the majority of them have behavioral issues. And so basically what an ABA does is they intervene to help minimize or eliminate an unwanted behavior. We also work with autistic students on day-to-day life skills, and we also provide academic support for students, for autistic students.
Okay, so how did you know that you wanted to do this? Or did you even know that you wanted to do this?
I did not know that I wanted to do this. I have a background in early childhood education, and I worked in several inclusion classrooms, mostly K through 2, early childhood. And I noticed that, in an inclusion classroom, there are students who have, it could be physical or learning disabilities. And then a lot of students also had behavioral challenges. And I remember there was an 88 who came in one day, and she was working with one of the students. And I was interested, and I kind of asked her some questions, and then I just decided that I would apply for the position, and I got the position, and I loved it ever since. It's a very challenging job, but I enjoy my job. I really do.
Okay. So what are some skills that you have developed while doing your job?
Oh, patience, a sense of humor, and an appreciation for the smallest of successes.
Okay. So, some of these successes, can you give me an example?
Sure. So there's a student that I work with right now. I always have a story to tell about him, but he bolts.
Mm-hmm.
So he could be standing right next to you, and then all of a sudden, you could be walking with him to class, and then all of a sudden he would just run away. And he usually does it because it's an attention-seeking disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Not a disorder. Erase that, Leah. It's not a disorder. It's an attention-seeking behavior. And so, like now, when he first started school, like last September, we had to have him wear like a gait belt, and someone had to constantly either hold his hand or hold on to him with the gait belt. Now he can walk. We can say, oh, it's time for you to go. The bell will ring, and he knows it's time for him to go to science, which is like on the third floor.
Mm-hmm.
And he will get up, pack his bags, and he can walk up there on his own, and we don't have to walk next to him. It's like we know that he's going to science. He still, every now and then, will try to bolt and run out of the building, but him being able just to transition from one space to another without bolting, that's a success. I mean, that's a huge success, but it's I'm very proud of his success.
Okay, so my next question is, what are some of your hobbies and interests?
So, I really enjoy baking, and I really, really enjoy like a good beach day. But since I, live in Boston, I don't get a chance to do that very often. Probably not more than 2 or 3 times a year during the summer. And then even to do that you got to drive all behind God back. And I also love to listen to soca, dancehall, reggae, any type of music, and I love to sing along to music. But soca, dancehall.
Okay, so how do you think that these hobbies and interests play into women's liberation?
Well, I think I mentioned before politics as one of my interests.
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely coincides with women's liberation. It's something that's been in the news for years, even before I came to America over, 30-something years ago. Can't say that I am heavily involved in women's liberation rights or the entire movement. But it is interesting to learn, how far women's rights have come and how much we've evolved. That sounds horrible.
It's fine. But what is some other information that you think I should know? It doesn't have to be about women's liberation right now. It could just be anything general that, you think I should know. Or the listeners should know.
I think I've hit all the points.
Okay. So, on to the next question. Do you find Barbados to be more liberal than America?
I would have to answer no. So the reason I say this is because Barbadians favor anything American. Don't get me wrong; they still favor their own. You know, they're very proud people. But there are some things that, as far as I don't know, if you consider like the judicial system and just socially, as far as liberties, there are just some things that just aren't equal. For instance, here in America, if you borrow money from an institution and, the law provides you, there are some laws that predict, harassment calls or, things of that nature, whereas you probably wouldn't go to jail because you owed money, whereas in Barbados, yeah, you go to court, and yes, you could serve time just for owing money. Like things like that. Let me see if I can think of an example of socially. Socially, for instance, the entire like gay pride, that is something that would not be smiled upon in Barbados. Even though it's becoming more accepted in America, and there are gay rights in America, there isn't such a thing as gay rights in Barbados. People can be, it's if you were gay, then you couldn't walk down the street flaunting it and expect that you would not be tormented or bullied, or that someone would, in Beijing terms, swing a big rock at your backside for being gay. It's not as widely accepted as it is in America. There are no gay rights in Barbados as compared to in America. Yes, people who are gay, they do try, they are stepping out more, but it's not as accepted as it is here. Yeah.
Okay. So, speaking on that, also, how would you say women's rights are in Barbados versus in America?
I think, from what I understand, from my point of view, I would say it's. I would say it's about equal. We do have women are valued in, Barbadian culture. We have women ministers in our House of Representatives. We have women educators. We have women can. Women are police officers, so women can hold different job titles in Barbados as in America. You don't really hear much like women being frowned upon as, you know what I mean? It's not to say that we're not. I wouldn't say that Barbados would be considered a third world country when it came to women's rights. I think that they have evolved as much as the whole movement has evolved in the United States. Culturally, I think there are older people who think that a woman's place is still, in the house, cooking. But as a nation, I would say the majority of us, like I said, it's evident. We have educators, we have policewomen, we have ministers, we have just, women can take their children to work, and they're, provided space, daycare, and workplaces for women. I think that we but didn't stand well when it comes to women's rights. I'm pretty sure. I can't speak on wages in comparison to men as their men counterparts, but for the most part, I would say that they're in good standing.
Okay. So, just like more personal view, what's your view on women's rights? Do you think women should be equal, or do you think women do belong in the house?
I definitely think that women are equal, should be, treated as equals to men. That whole entire phase with women belonging in the house, that's done with, that's gone. And circumstances in some families have it so that women can't just stay home and be in the house. There's so many single mothers, you know what I mean, out there today that they have no choice but to go out into a work environment and work. And I think that women nowadays are so motivated and so proud that they want to do better. They want to excel. I don't think that women are excelling or want to excel because they just want to prove men wrong. I think that it's just women wanting to do better for themselves.
Okay. So, you being a woman, do you have an example in which your position has been challenged because of your gender?
Because I was a woman?
Yes.
I do. So, like I said, I work with some students some of whom have very challenging behaviors. And I currently work with a student. He is 12 years old. He's about he's about 5 feet 7 inches. He's very strong. And he has started to display aggressive behaviors. And so sometimes, like, I'll hear I'll hear like my peers saying, "Oh, well, maybe next year they should consider getting him a male ABA to work with him." When the truth of the matter is, regardless if he had a male or a female ABA, he would still exhibit some of the behaviors. He challenges all authority. The dean of the school is male, and the dean of the school still has a hard time, getting him to comply or, for this student to take him seriously. But then again, it's part of his disability, whether he's whether he's receiving male or female directives, he's going to challenge. And as far as the aggression piece, I could have been working with a 5-year-old student who was a 5-year-old female, and a 5-year-old female can still be pretty aggressive. It's all just a part of the job. I know what I'm getting into. And so, yeah, sometimes people think that, they see me working with him and they're like, oh my goodness, like, you're going to work with him? Like, why wouldn't you let this other teacher who's a male work with him instead?
Okay. So would you say that this, at this point in your life, like, not that you first realized, but like, it's bringing more into light that women liberation and women's equality rights aren't, just?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes. Do you feel at this point, not at this point, but like how you just described that example, do you feel that example is displaying how like women's equality rights and women's liberation is, not fair, not just?
Yes. It's definitely, it's just like it's just so blatant. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
if no one would question, no one would question um, my being able to perform my job if I were a male. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I do a pretty damn good job. um, so I think sometimes people are surprised when they see the interaction that I have with the student, and sometimes it takes two men. Like if he's flopped to the floor, sometimes it takes two men to transport him from one area to another. Just as if I was working with them and he flopped to the floor, I would need assistance, whether it was male or female. But I'm always able to
Mm-hmm.
give my best performance in my job, and
Okay.
it has nothing to do with whether I'm male or female.
Okay. So
Did that answer your question, or did I
that did.
go around the mulberry bush
No,
and
that
back?
answered my question. Like, we can tell, like, you're all for, women's rights, that you think women and men should be equal, especially in workplaces.
Yeah.
So, at what point in your life did you, like, realize, or when did it come into light that women's rights were not equal? Was that when you first, like, moved to America, or? Yeah.
So no, the answer is no. It's not when I first moved to America. I don't know that there was an event in my life that made me realize it. I don't think that there was one particular event,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember what age. But I remember growing up and always hearing stories on the news or hearing just people in my environment talk about women's rights, and that's been going on ever since I can remember. Like I said, I can't pinpoint an event or a time
Mm-hmm.
where I became aware of it, but it was always something, because there was always something going on with, oh, women are fighting for better pay, or they want the same pay as their male counterparts, or I've always heard of well, is she going to be able to do a man's job? Why is she a police officer? So it's always been evident. And even I remember growing up and walking to the police station, walking past the police station every day. This is in Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember always seeing a woman police officer sitting at the front desk. But I remember asking, this is a true story, Leah. Like, I remember asking my dad, like, how come, you never see women arresting the men? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was younger than 7. But I remember, like, back then, it always seemed that women, even though they were in equal roles as their counterparts, but it seemed as though the expectancy for them to perform their job, it was always minimized.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, they weren't expected to be the ones to go in and arrest or have like a hands-on situation. Oh no, she can sit at the front desk and
Mm-hmm.
she can take the reports that come in, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So, over the course of your life, do you think that these women's rights and women inequalities have influenced or changed your life?
It's definitely done both.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, my job, as far as dealing with the aggressive behaviors, some people can say, oh, well, when you're working with older students, especially a male student, that would be a man's job,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But here I am doing it, and I'm fine with doing it, and it's obvious that I can do the job,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, it has influenced. It has changed my life, and it has influenced me.
Okay. So I have 2 more questions for you. So this is just about your family and like your environment, people around you. Do you know any members of your family or any members a part of your environment that were a part of the women's liberation movement? It doesn't have to be back in like the 1980s, but it can be like, the one that recently happened in DC outside of the White House. Something as simple as that. Not as simple, but as current as that.
So I don't know um, anyone who participated in the recent one in Washington, D.C., but I did hear a lot about it. And as far as having any family members who participated in any women's liberation or women's equal rights, unfortunately, no. I would say that there aren't. I don't have any family members who have, fought for women's rights.
Okay, so you've obviously, made your point that you do think that women should be equal to men and that men shouldn't, be obligated to a job because they're a man. So, sometime in the future, do you think that you will join any women's liberation movements or any women's right movements to get your point across?
Would I join a movement?
It could be as small as like in downtown Boston, or as big as something like in DC, like anything.
So I am not, my personality, my character traits, I am not, I wouldn't say that I'm outgoing. So I wouldn't be the one out there like on the front line, you know what I mean, protesting. I may be the one in the office making signs, organizing, getting permits or any, something like that. But the one out there giving the speeches and, with the bullhorn, that may not be me. But I definitely would, if I was presented with an opportunity to offer services towards a movement of that nature, I would do it. Probably just from a little more behind the scenes, not because I wouldn't want to be seen doing something like that. It's just that that's my personality, and that's pretty much how I would offer my services towards whatever the movement was, as far as women's liberation.
And as you know, like every position matters in the women's liberation movement, especially the people who are, making the posters. Because without those posters, what movement would happen?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Voice on paper. Yep.
But thank you, Leah Charles, for your participation in my oral history interview.
You are most welcome, Miss Alexander.